Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're using patterned vinyl and wrapping it around cups. Let's go. For our first design, I'm using a 20-ounce skinny straight from Craft Haven, and we're going to do a little half and half with this floral and striped pattern. So I'm going to start with the stripes, and I want it to go just about halfway, maybe a little bit less than half. I want the floral to take up a little bit more than the stripes. So I'm going to wrap it around and just measure and cut off any excess that I don't need. I don't need a whole sheet, obviously, because I'm just doing a half wrap. So I just marked it with my pen, and then I'm going to cut it out with scissors. This side is going to be the bottom, and we're going to wrap it around the bottom of the cup, so it doesn't need to be perfectly straight. So once it's cut out, I'm going to peel back one end of the vinyl and keep the backing on. So I'm peeling off maybe about an inch of the vinyl to be my little anchor as I wrap it around the cup. And I'm going to apply this line as straight as possible to make sure that my wrap applies straight on the cup. If your initial anchor placement is crooked, your entire vinyl wrap is going to be crooked. So you want to make sure that this is as straight as possible. Once I've got my anchor down, I'm going to start to smooth the vinyl around the cup. And I'm just going to use my thumb to push the vinyl around the cup and also push the backing off. So I'm really letting this do the work for me. I'm just using my thumbs to smooth it around the cup as we go, make sure I don't have any bubbles. And then once we get to a point where the vinyl is about to meet, I'm going to cut off that excess. I don't like to waste any patterned vinyl. I'll always find a use for it, even this little small piece. So I'm going to just pull the rest of the backing off. And then since this is striped vinyl, I want to make sure that I get it, of course, as straight as possible. And then I'm going to take a little piece of orange painter's tape and line it up in a straight line and just cut off any excess to make sure that my seams match up the best they can. The painter's tape serves as a guide for helping me cut a straight line. I can't cut a straight line to save my life, so when I'm doing stuff like this, I use the painter's tape and just run my craft knife along the edge, and I get a lot more straight of a line that way than when I just try to do it freehand. Carefully peel your painter's tape off and then separate the part of your seam that you're cutting off from the part that you want to stay on the cup. Make sure you don't peel both of them off at the same time. And then what we're going to do with the bottom is wrap the bottom around the cup to kind of finish it, and then we'll finish the center later. So I'm taking this end piece, I've got about an inch on the end, and I'm pulling it as tight as I can all to the center of the cup. So I'm trying to avoid any creases or folding in the outer rim that we're going to keep, and I'm letting it all crease up in the middle there. And then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and just cut along the seam of the bottom of the cup. There's a little ridge in the bottom, and I just keep my craft knife in one place and spin the cup and let that do the work for me. Once that's removed, I'm going to push it down, and there we go. Now that we've got the bottom half of this wrap applied, we're going to have a little bit more of a guide for the top floral half. So I'm measuring the same way I did with the bottom and cutting it out with scissors, and I'm going to apply this the exact same way. I'm going to peel back about an inch, and then I'm going to use that bottom striped part to help me get this top portion perfectly straight. So I'm not overlapping these. I want them to basically meet up perfectly in the middle, and then we'll add a stripe to cover up that seam later. But I don't want them overlapping because then we'll have a little ridge in there, and we don't want that. So make sure you just put them right up against the edge of each other. I'm doing the same technique, smoothing with my thumb, making sure we don't have any air bubbles or creasing or anything like that. And once our edges are about to meet, I'm going to cut off the excess just like I did with the striped part. Keep your vinyl, everybody. So I'm going to meet up the seams the same way that I did before, except this time I decided to just cut it freehand, and it turned out just fine. So what I'm going to do now for the top rim is take any excess that I have. I've got about a half an inch up here, and I'm going to pull it really tight up and kind of over that rim. And this is going to help us prevent any bubbles or crinkling or anything up at the top. So I just want to pull this as tight as possible, and then I'm going to find the seam and separate it. And I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, which is really sharp. I just changed the blade, and I'm going to just go right over that rim to cut off that excess. This should be a really smooth and easy cut. If you find that your knife is kind of skipping over the vinyl and you're getting a jagged, kind of skipped over, messy line up at the top, change the blade in your knife. It will make a world of difference. What I'm doing next is taking my knife at a slight angle and just going over that rim one more time. I don't want any vinyl to be hanging over the rim of the cup or up on top of the rim of the cup. So I'm just cleaning up any little stragglers that might be hanging out up there. If you see any bubbles in your wrap, you can just poke them with the point of your X-Acto knife and then all of the air will just smooth out. Just make sure you don't stab it too hard that it leaves a mark after you smooth it out. Okay, so here's our first wrap all complete. I'm going to set it aside and work on the second one. For the next one, I'm using a 32-ounce Plump from the Steel Magnolia. And on this one, we're gonna use these 3 different floral patterns that all go together. And we're gonna do 3 thick stripes on the cup. So what we need to do is figure out how wide each stripe is going to be. So I'm using my little measuring tape here to measure the length of the tumbler. I'm gonna take that length and divide it by 3. Our cup was about 11.5 inches tall or long. So that's about 3.5 inches per stripe. 11.5 divided by 3 is actually 3, but I'm using a little bit of extra just in case. Always leave extra on each side when you're doing vinyl wraps. Now that I know the width of each stripe, I'm going to mark that with a Sharpie using a ruler. So I'm just going 3.5 inches, making a dot, and then another 3.5 inches and making a dot. So I know where my stripes need to go. Then I'm taking some blue painter's tape and I'm taping off my sections. I'm going to start with the middle stripe and then do the top and bottom afterwards. So I'm taping off the top half and the bottom half. Make sure that your tape goes into the part that you're not doing, not up into the middle, so your stripes all stay the same size. So once I've got it taped off, I'm going to cut a piece out of my vinyl. I'm going to measure 3.5 inches and mark that and cut it out using my paper cutter. Once I've got my strip cut, I'm going to just wrap it around to make sure that my sizing is correct. And it is. So I'm gonna cut off these little extra seams. You don't have to do this because you're gonna cut them off anyway, so don't worry about it. And I'm applying this, you guessed it, the exact same way. I pulled about 1 inch off the backing and I'm applying my anchor. Make sure you get this as straight as possible. And then I'm doing the exact same technique. I'm smoothing with my thumbs until I've got my seams meeting up, cutting off the excess and smoothing that down. As you can see, I didn't apply perfectly straight, but it ends up being fine because we have our tape. We're gonna cut around the top and bottom seam as well. So I'm taking my blue painter's tape. I'm gonna cut my excess off using my X-Acto knife the same way we did before. I'm going to carefully peel that seam off and then pull my tape off carefully as well. I don't want anything to lift. And then I'm going to rub my finger around the seam of the bottom to make sure that I'm using that tape as a guide to cut off this excess at the top and bottom. Even though the tape is on the other side, we can still use it as a guide. Hey, that rhymed. You can peel off that excess at the bottom and then peel off the tape as well. That is so satisfying. We're gonna do the exact same thing on the top seam and then we'll move on to our bottom vinyl wrap. Before I just go wrapping away, I'm going to measure again just to make sure that I cut these next 2 pieces of vinyl to the right size. So I'm going to measure them, mark them with my Sharpie, cut them out with my little paper slicer, and then we can start wrapping away. For the top and bottom stripes, instead of applying them the same way that we did with our first tumbler, meeting those seams right up against each other, I'm going to leave a tiny bit of overlap just because we cut both edges of that middle stripe versus just having a clean, perfectly straight edge from not altering the vinyl at all. So I just want to make sure we avoid any gaps and don't have anything that's a little bit crooked. I am going to use that middle stripe as a guide for cutting off that overlap, and to help me cut as straight as possible, I'm going to keep my knife in one place and I'm just going to roll the cup on the table and then I'm going to peel off that excess, and we did pretty good because there aren't any gaps here. Finishing the bottom on this cup is going to be a little bit difficult because, as you can see, I didn't leave any overlap on the bottom. I usually like to leave at least 1 inch, and I just was thinking about the length of the cup, not the length including the bottom. So I pulled that as tightly as possible, smoothed it as much as I could, and we will finish that a little bit later. I'm applying the top stripe the exact same way I did the bottom one. I'm leaving a little bit of overlap on top of that middle stripe, and we'll use that as a guide to cut later. We're also going to clean up the rim the exact same way. I also didn't leave a ton of excess up here, but that's okay because we can just cut it off. We're not trying to pull it over an edge. So just use your X-Acto knife, cut off the excess, and then we'll clean up the rim the same way we did on our first cup, holding our knife at a slight angle and just cleaning up any of those little stragglers. I did a thin coat of epoxy on each of our cups to make sure that everything was sealed and smooth, and now we're ready to add our stripe detailing. For our stripes, I'm using just regular Oracal 651, and I cut these at 11.5 inches long by 0.15 inches high. And to apply them, to make sure that I get them as straight as possible, I'm just rolling my cup on my table and kind of holding the vinyl in one place and rolling the cup to let it stay as straight as possible. You can also apply these stripes with your cup on your turner and just turn your cup on your turner as you apply the stripes. Doing it that way with your cup on your turner is especially helpful if you're using a cup that has a taper. It helps keep your cup totally level so you can apply your stripes as straight as possible. We're going to apply these stripes the exact same way for our second cup. For these top two stripes, we did have a slight gap. So with these thinner stripes, I want to make sure that we cover those and that you can't tell there was ever a gap in the first place. And we also want to make sure that our seams are meeting up in the same place. So I'm trying to line up these thin vinyl stripes with the seams of the vinyl wrap that we did. So all the seams are on one side of the cup versus all over. I'm sealing those stripes with a coat of epoxy, and once that's cured, we're going to finish the bottoms. For our pink and black cup, I measured the diameter of the bottom and cut a pink circle out of vinyl. And then for our navy and coral floral, haha, that rhymed again, I measured the diameter and then cut a circle a little bit smaller than that size. So for this pink and black cup, since we had enough of that striped vinyl left to wrap around the bottom of our cup, we can just apply this pink circle straight to the tumbler and the cup will look finished. However, for our coral floral, that makes me laugh because it rhymes, we don't have enough room to just put this circle on straight. So I'm going to tape off this bottom rim of our cup, and I'm going to paint it using gloss navy blue paint from Rustoleum to give us a more finished canvas to then apply that vinyl circle to the bottom. Once our paint has dried, we'll just apply that circle to the bottom. Please ignore my navy blue spray paint stained hands. I forgot to wear gloves when I painted, and now I must live with the consequences. Once we've got our vinyl circle applied, we're going to go right into our final coats of epoxy. I did one coat of CC DIY Fast Set, and then I did a final coat of artist resin, also from CC DIY. Once those were all cured, we were done. These were so much fun to make. I'm so obsessed with pattern vinyl lately. I just love the creative opportunity that you have with all these different patterns. You can mix them together. You can come up with some really fun combinations. So hopefully this video is inspiring to you. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with using different vinyl patterns. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you are not already. We come out with new videos every Tuesday and Saturday. Don't forget also to follow us on Instagram at Made by Manny and Mal, join our Facebook group, which is linked in the description, and we'll see you in the next video.